Synthetics by Lucas Alpi. Chapter 3.
So, I'm free to go?
Stephen clasped his hands together, fingers digging into his palms as he sat in the cold, whitewashed room. It smelled faintly of sterile air and the sweat of men who had spent too much time waiting. The walls were bare, unremarkable, save for the small rectangular vent in the upper corner that let out a low mechanical hum cycling in filtered, recycled air. Across from him, seated behind a smooth stainless steel desk, was the man delivering his verdict.
"Yes, you are,"
the man said. His voice was even, almost pleasant.
"Though we'll still be watching. You know how this works."
A warm smile. Too warm. The kind of smile that had been rehearsed in a mirror. Stephen's father would have called it a politician's smile.
"We'll make it comfortable for you,"
the man continued, flipping a page in the thick staple file, resting before him.
"Discreet. But just so you understand, what you inhaled in that room was highly experimental. Unpredictable, at least in theory. That's what the higher-ups tell me. But you show no symptoms, no illness."
He shrugged, clicking his pen.
"So, you're good to go, Stephen."
Stephen's jaw tightened. His throat was dry, but relief coursed through his veins. He let out a slow, measured breath.
So, I'm fired.
The man chuckled, tapping his file.
"Not exactly. You're still under review."
Stephen leaned forward. The chair beneath him groaned, its metal frame stiff from years of use.
Meaning?
"We'll call you if we need you."
Stephen's eyes flicked to the file, to the man's hands. He was too casual, his movements slow and deliberate, theatrical.
What about Matthew?
A pause. Small, but there. The man tilted his head, feigning thought.
"I don't have his files on me."
A lie. Stephen didn't push, didn't let the flicker of unease reach his face. He simply nodded and forced his shoulders to relax. Outside the room, beyond the thick reinforced glass, was a dim hallway. The lights flickered at odd intervals, buzzing in their casings. At the far end, past the sealed doors, was the rest of the facility, an underground labyrinth of metal corridors, security gates, and rooms where things were studied and locked away. None of it mattered anymore. He was going home. When the man left, Stephen didn't sit still. Couldn't. He paced, worn-out soles of his boots scuffing against the cold tile floor, back and forth, like a man waiting for news from the delivery room. He kept his hands in his pockets, fingers curling and uncurling. Plans unraveled in his head. Gifts. He needed gifts. His daughter wanted singing lessons. He'd pay for the best instructor in the city, no matter how overpriced. He stopped, grinned. His gaze found the small, dark camera dome nestled in the upper corner of the ceiling.
Appreciate you guys,
he called out, voice light, with mock gratitude. It had become a habit, talking to them. He knew they had files on him, had studied his past, traced his entire history. But saying it out loud, his thoughts out in the open, telling his own story on his own terms, felt like taking something back. Maybe it annoyed them. He hoped it did. They had given him books to pass the time, but he'd burned through them too quickly. Now, only silence remained, a silence so thick it pressed against his skull. He didn't reread books, not here, not when every word felt deafening in a place so still. Isolation did that. It sharpened the senses, made his mind run too fast, too loud. He could feel every breath, hear the blood moving in his veins. When it became too much, he slept, because sleep was an escape, a natural defense, a way for the brain to forget it existed. And Stephen abused it. He slept until his skull ached, until his body protested. Then he would rise, rub his eyes, and start the cycle over again. 3 hours later, the door hissed open. They let him out. The halls were wide and empty, illuminated by fluorescent light strips running along the ceiling. The walls were smooth, metallic, sterile in a way that felt unnatural. As they walked, the guards kept their distance. Their footsteps echoed, synchronized, and measured. Stephen didn't speak. They entered a vast holding chamber, larger than any of the rooms he had been in. For a split second, he thought it was some kind of indoor training field, maybe for scientists who wanted to keep fit between projects. A woman stood behind a plain metal desk, exhaustion carved into her face. The bags under her eyes were dark, her hair slightly disheveled. She barely glanced at him as she pushed a small gray tray forward.
Personal effects,
she muttered. The list was read methodically, like a prisoner's release inventory. Wallet. Bag. Stephen snatched them up, squeezing them tightly, inhaling the familiar scent of his own clothes. The guards flanked him again, silent, unmoving. They stepped into an industrial-sized elevator, metal walls smooth as a vault. The ride was slow, and the only sound was the soft hum of machinery. Did the guards know who he was? What he had done to warrant this level of security? Probably not. All they knew was what level of clearance had been assigned to him. Level 1? Level 2? Higher? If it was the highest, he'd take it as a badge of honor. The top floor, another door, another document to sign. And then the bag. A black cloth over the head, standard protocol. The first time it had sent a spike of panic through his chest. Now it was just procedure. Now it meant freedom. A door clicked. A firm hand guided him forward. Stephen felt it before he heard it. The open air, the change in temperature, the subtle movement of wind against fabric, then the low, powerful hum of a plane. The sound rumbled through the tarmac, vibrating through the soles of his boots. They walked. And then, finally, the metal ramp beneath his feet. He took a deep breath, smiled. He was going home.